Dang it. My old footage is too dim. I need more light. More light! More light! More light! More light! More light! More light!
Commence primary ignition.
Today we're looking at hardware HD video sources that can be recorded onto DVHS. What's this laptop doing here? I know it has a Firewire port, and I know you can do some software playback and recording with DVHS, but we're not talking about that today. We're also not talking about D-Theater or the history of DVHS. Techmoan and Oddity Archive, respectively, have good videos on those topics. Although Oddity Archive gets a few technical details wrong. There are only 6 models of D-Theater deck that I'm aware of, and all of them are JVC except for a Lone Marantz model. All other DVHS decks do not support D-Theater tape playback, although HDNet tapes like the one on the right supposedly play fine in regular DVHS VCRs. An advantage the D-Theater decks have is they support component video output in HD, and are not limited to Firewire for HD video output. However, some of the recording devices covered in this video also support playing back video off of Firewire and converting it into component video. Now, of course, if you don't want to record your own tapes, one thing you can do with these D-Theater DVHS decks is play back D-Theater movie releases. You can get pretty much every film that was put out on DVHS on Blu-ray. So aside from collecting these tapes for collecting's sake, and the novelty of watching an HD video on a VCR feeding a CRT TV, I'm not sure why anyone would particularly want to watch films on this format. But it is good for what it is, and what it was at the time. For much cheaper, you can find a good SVHS VCR that is not DVHS that will play legacy VHS and SVHS tapes just as good as these will, but at a much lower price. What I see the main usage of these machines for is time shifting and playing back the tapes that were made in the DVHS format. So here I have a couple of typical DVHS VCRs. They work just like a regular VCR, and are in fact compatible with regular VHS and SVHS, and will record off-the-air analog broadcasts, which now no longer exist, and analog cable, which is nearly extinct, just like any regular SVHS VCR would. What makes DVHS special is that it is capable of recording high-definition video. Unfortunately, most DVHS VCRs did not implement it well. Why? Because Hollywood and copy protection. That's why. When DVHS came out, HDMI was not yet a thing. And for a number of years after HDMI was a thing, DVHS VCRs still did not have HDMI. They wanted to design a digital input for these VCRs that had copyright protection. So they took the existing camcorder DV cable signal specifications and modified those specifications to allow recording at HD resolution and to include HDCP, High Definition Content Protection. This right here is an IEEE 1394 connector, also known as Firewire, also known as iLink on these VCRs. And this jack and a second identical one on the rear are the only HD recording inputs on this VCR. At the very end of the line, before JVC discontinued this format, they did make a couple of models of DVHS decks that had HDMI output for playback, and one model that had a built-in ATSC over-the-air HD TV tuner. And I would very much love to have one of those decks. So why hardware-based HD TV recording? Well, every time I've tried to use a PC as a DVR, or used a PC in any capacity to try to record a video input of any sort, it's usually ended in drastically subpar results. So since we're approaching the statistical average watch time of my videos, I figured I would give the TLDR summary of what I'm about to say. The best way to record DVHS tapes in high definition is to get yourself a HDMI to ATSC RF modulator. That little V coax box I was able to pick up for $250 used on eBay, and you may be able to get better deals elsewhere on comparable models. And an ATSC tuner with Firewire output, and use that to record to DVHS. Feed HDMI into the modulator and feed the RF from the modulator into the tuner and feed the tuner's Firewire into the DVHS VCR. And you can choose with your ATSC modulator to transmit with a bow tie UHF antenna like the one pictured. You'll actually need two, one for the transmitter, one for the receiver, or you can pipe the signal directly into the receiver. Some of the modulators may need to have their output power turned down to not overload the input of the receiver, which is less of a problem if you're using antennas. I've found I get the highest quality recordings and the highest picture resolution, full 1080 HD out of this method. Additionally, the Panasonic box has built in the capability of converting the Firewire back to high definition component video at up to 1080, which will enable older DVHS decks that lack any high definition output other than Firewire to playback in HD. So let's look at the four devices we have here. This is a Panasonic model TU-DST51 ATSC high definition and standard definition digital television tuner. This DTV tuner can tune digital television free over-the-air broadcasts. This box was actually designed to interface with a Panasonic DVHS deck and control its recording. And it is, in fact, compatible with JVC DVHS decks as well. There was some recording interchange compatibility issues between JVC and other brands of DVHS VCR. Case in point, this Panasonic box was designed to operate the playback and recording controls on the VCR through the Firewire cable connecting the two, but that protocol apparently is incompatible with the JVC decks I have. The second option is this RCA satellite box. Supposedly, there were a number of satellite and cable boxes produced back in the day that had Firewire output and were specifically designed to be compatible with DVHS. This satellite box also has an ATSC DTV tuner in it. Interestingly, this box did not come from factory with the Firewire ports here to connect to a DVHS VCR. Apparently, there was a company back in the day called 169time. I think their website was 169time.com, and they offered to modify these satellite boxes and a number of other devices, I believe, to be compatible with DVHS decks. This particular satellite box has such a modification and was the box that the previous owner of my DVHS decks used with those decks. I don't know on this RCA satellite receiver if it is compatible with current satellite systems and subscriptions. I don't have and I'm not interested in paying for satellite, so I don't know if this is still a usable satellite box. I do know that the DTV tuner on this box works without a satellite subscription, which is good. But if you are on satellite and you know whether this is usable, or know of one that is usable, let us know in the comments. I'd be curious to know if these are still supported in this day and age. Additionally, you can record off of cable television. Some of the older cable boxes out there, such as this particular box that then Time Warner Cable, now Spectrum Cable, gave to us back in 2012 when we first got our cable hookup here. This box has IEEE 1394 Firewire jacks on it. And with one of these 4-pin to 6-pin Firewire cables, you can connect this cable box into your DVHS VCR and record cable television. Now, I'll say that this cable box's Firewire output is not exactly ideal. In this day and age, a lot of cable television systems use more advanced codecs than DVHS was designed to handle, and in some cases higher bit rates than DVHS was designed to handle. And some channels on this cable box are impossible to record either because of incorrect codec, excessive bit rates, or HDCP being set, which will cause the deck not to produce a recording that can be usably played back. Some of the channels that can be recorded on this also will yield recordings with significant amounts of dropout and error. Recording off of this cable box on some channels, I can count number of errors in picture and sound per minute. And lastly, the Thompson Grass Valley ADVC HD50 has HDMI in and HDV out. And this box will create an HDV signal out of HDMI. So in the course of filming this video, I learned some new things about this Grass Valley box. Previous tests, I had only tried recording with a 1080i input signal to this Grass Valley box. And the result was that the Firewire output of the box would pass through to the D-VHS VCR and pass through the D-VHS VCR's component video and audio outputs perfectly. However, if I tried to record the signal, it would record, but on playback there would be virtually no audio and horrendous video glitches. Well, I discovered during the filming of this video that if I feed this Grass Valley box with a 720p resolution signal, the DVHS VCR will record the signal and play back the signal perfectly, both audio and video. So what I believe the issue is with this Grass Valley box and DVHS VCRs is that the 1080i bitrate that this puts out on the Firewire cable is too high for the DVHS VCR to adequately record the entire signal. It's probably dropping packets of the Firewire signal, and thus on playback the dropped packets translate to video errors. So this box is usable if you don't want a resolution higher than 720p. Time to demonstrate the Grass Valley. Let's play another one of my YouTube videos into it and watch. Let's hit play record on the VCR, and let's hit play on the video. Oh. I made this recording in 720p. You can see how the audio and video both pass through the DVHS machine live just fine. I'm gonna stop. So here's my Philips 212 turntable with 78 RPM modification. This is a 1080i Grass Valley test recording I made. There's no sound because the sound didn't record, and you can see how lousy the recording is. Another thing for owners of non-D-Theater DVHS VCRs. Those boxes lack component video output. So this box, while you could record it on one of those decks, you'll have to come up with an alternate playback method. The Panasonic TU-DST51 ATSC tuner box and the RCA DTC100 that has the 16:9 time modification, both of those boxes have provisions to play back video over Firewire and output through the tuner boxes composite video outputs. Though in the case of the RCA box, it's a VGA connector instead of a component video port, but you can still adapt VGA to component video with the correct cabling. So why have I accumulated all of these devices other than being a vintage technology nerd? Well, sometimes I go on long vacations and I have a lot of programs I want to watch after the fact. On demand through Spectrum is sometimes spotty and sometimes makes you wait a week to see the episode of the show that you missed yesterday, which is highly frustrating. And for a while, I've been wanting to time shift digitally. You might say, Tom, why would you want DVHS as a recording format instead of using a computer? Well, the first solutions I tried for capturing cable were computer-based. I found that most computer-based recording solutions are overpriced, and most that are within my budget are highly unreliable or incapable of doing what I want. Now, some of you will recommend, I'm sure, various cable tuner solutions and whatnot, but the problem is Spectrum Cable encrypts every single channel they send. None of it's transmitted as clear QAM, all of it's encrypted QAM. So you literally cannot tune any cable channel on anything other than a cable company issued, cable company rented cable box. So that didn't leave me a lot of options. The only way to record off cable in HD is either one of these boxes with Firewire or one of these adapter boxes that only supports HDMI as a high definition output. The RF connector here is standard definition analog video, which is useful for my vintage TVs, but useless for HD recording. Until recently, I could almost never borrow this cable box. This cable box was living room only. Recently, we got rid of all of these adapter boxes, and this is the only cable box in the house, so when I want to record something, I now have to borrow it, and part of my agreement with the family who pay the cable bills is that they get this most of the time, but when my programs are on, I get to borrow it, seeing as how I gave up my little adapter box. Tom, if you gave it up, why are you holding it in your hand? Well, through the power of local dummies donating their cable boxes to local thrift stores, I can cheaply have a adapter box that will not work on my cable here. This box has probably been deactivated by the cable company, but is a marvelous and cheap prop to explain what I used to have. Yeah, this box is doorstop mode, but it's exactly like what I used to have, so I can use it as a visual aid. Yeah. My goal up until I recently lost these boxes was to find a way of recording off of HDMI in a reliable timer recording capacity. I've been filming without extra light, haven't I? I'm an idiot. Well, we'll fix it in post. So the solution for recording HDMI I eventually landed on was this Cloner Alliance HDML cloner box. In conjunction with an HDMI splitter, the splitter being used to remove HDCP from the HDMI signal to enable recording copy-protected HDMI sources. So this HDML cloner box records from HDMI, VGA, component video, and composite video to a USB memory device in various high-definition, PC, and standard definition resolutions. Now this is the recording input jack pack DVHS should have implemented. Heck, if they had even implemented half of it, a lot of DVHS owners would be a lot happier. If DVHS had had a versatile jack pack for recording in HD from the beginning, it probably would have been much more successful as a format. B. Westlife did a nice review of the analog capture capabilities of this box. I'm guessing he bought his a couple years after I got mine, so this device is not a perfect solution for capturing HD video from television sources. One thing that V. Westlife never mentioned is that this box is extremely picky about what USB thumb drive it will record to. This style of Lexar 32 gig drive seems to be ideal. It took me about 4 years of using this box and close to a dozen different drives of various brands and sizes tried until I landed on this. This particular drive is discontinued from what I understand, and the newer Lexars don't work with this box at all. On the way to finding this drive, I encountered numerous drives that this box wouldn't record to it. Some that it would record to for a few sessions before corrupting, oftentimes to the point of actually bricking the thumb drive to where it couldn't even be reformatted. So bigger drives at this point aren't a very viable option. I've tried larger sizes of Lexar, and while they will record and not brick, those drives seem to encounter video errors at a rate of better than once per half an hour, which is unacceptable to me. But the biggest annoyance with using this Cloner Alliance box for recording off television is that it is a single event timer on this version of software. I don't know about newer versions of this box if they added additional timer capacity, but the one I have is a single event timer and doesn't allow for any kind of weekly repetition. The only repeating schedule it will do is an everyday recording. And if you go on vacation for more than a week and you have a weekly program that is over 3 or 4 hours long, what will end up happening is you will have to choose which week of the show you want to record and lose a week, because the single event timer on this box cannot capture both events, and a recording of that length will consume a good portion of the memory and outright fill a memory before the second week's program airs. So I've been frustrated with the limited timer capability of this. So I figured out a great workaround, somewhat spendy, but a great workaround that allows me to record any high-definition video source onto a DVHS tape. My solution is to take all of my HDMI HD video sources, feed them into this HDMI splitter and HDMI switch that scrubs high-definition copy protection from all HDMI signals that pass through it, and feed one of its outputs into this ATSC modulator. The RF output of the modulator feeds into a UHF bow tie antenna. To record it to DVHS, I then tune it on a ATSC HD tuner with Firewire output, such as this Panasonic or this RCA. Both of these ATSC tuners are capable of tuning the output of that modulator and converting it into a Firewire signal that these DVHS VCRs will record flawlessly. So I'm going to have a demonstration. So the blinking light on the satellite/DTV box indicates that it's receiving a DTV signal. So to demonstrate DTV recording, I have the HDMI output of my Media Center PC feeding into my ATSC transmitter, which is transmitting ATSC to the ATSC tuner that is in the satellite box, which is feeding into the DVHS deck. It was at that moment my smartphone camera reached its maximum file size, split the video into 2 files, and corrupted the second one. So I have no video beyond that. So instead I'm going to use the HDMI cloner box's capture of the VCR recording. Zenith model 7500W Franken-Chancellor with Space Command 1600. Now you're probably wondering what I mean by Franken-Chancellor and by Space Command 1600. So that's all the ways I know to record in DVHS. One thing I would very much like is a solution that takes the Firewire output and converts it to HDMI to get a fully digital output from the deck. Currently the only solution I know of is to buy one of the later DVHS VCRs that has HDMI output and use it to play back and or connect Firewire from one of these older decks to it and play the older deck through the newer deck. If anyone knows of a good solution to that issue, I would love to hear about it. Also, I'm going to be starting a DVHS discussion group on Facebook that I will link in the description and possibly in the top corner over here. I hope all of you who are interested in this format check it out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you use this format, any tips, tricks, interesting accessories that you use with your DVHS decks. I haven't found any forum or group out there that seems to actively discuss this topic, and DVHS seems to be popular on eBay and have a popular collector following, so it seems logical that the people interested in owning this format would want to chat about it. So that concludes this video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this, and consider subscribing to the channel for more vintage electronics content. I may even do a follow-up video. If there's enough interest, I may even research recording and playing back DVHS through Firewire to computers and do a video on that topic. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in that. Thanks for watching.